My name is Nathan Cole, and the moment I heard my wife tell her friends she was settling for me, I knew our marriage was already over, not because the words were shocking, but because they came out so easily, like she'd said them 100 times before. I had just walked in after a long shift, grocery bags cutting into my fingers, expecting the usual routine. A quick kiss, dinner talk, maybe a show on the couch, the normal married life rhythm. Instead, her voice drifted from the kitchen in that bright, intimate tone she saved for her girlfriends. The one that always sounded like a private club I didn't belong to. I wasn't snooping. I was literally standing in my own hallway. But when you hear your own life being discussed like a product review, your body freezes before your brain catches up. I don't know, girls, she said, laughing softly. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just settling, you know? The laugh wasn't sad. It wasn't vulnerable. It was casual, like she was talking about the weather or a restaurant she was tired of. The bags suddenly felt heavier. Not because of the food, but because I realized I'd been carrying something else for years without noticing. One of her friends chimed in through the speaker, smug and confident. But he's stable, right? That has to count for something. My wife repeated the word stable like it had a bad taste. Yeah, stable. Predictable. Safe. But they're right. Am I actually living my best life? Or am I just comfortable? Comfortable. That's what our marriage had been reduced to in her mouth, comfort. Like an old sweater you stop appreciating because it's always there. I set the groceries down quietly and stood there as my mind started connecting dots I didn't want connected. This wasn't a random thought. This was a conversation that had a flow to it, like they'd rehearsed it before. How many times had my safe qualities been dissected like flaws? How long had she been treating 7 years together like a consolation prize? Another voice jumped in, airy and encouraging. You could always see what else is out there. You're still young, you're gorgeous. Why limit yourself? That line hit me like a shove, not because it was surprising, but because my wife didn't shut it down. There was a pause, a thoughtful silence. The kind that tells you someone is picturing the alternative. Then she finally said, I mean, it's not that simple. We have a life together. But sometimes I look at other couples and they seem so alive, so passionate. And I'm just stuck in routine. Stuck. Routine. That was her summary of everything I'd done. The weekend coffees I brought her in bed. The nights I listened to her work drama until my eyes burned. The way I showed up for her plans even when they weren't mine. Apparently none of that counted as love, just stable, just predictable. Her friend declared, like a motivational poster with a pulse. Life is too short to settle. You deserve to feel excited to come home. The irony made my jaw tighten, because I had come home excited only to find out she wasn't excited to see me at all. She was actively auditioning a new life with an audience. Then my wife said it, the sentence that locked everything into place. You know what? You're right. I am settling, and maybe it's time I stop. I stood there in the hallway and felt something in me go quiet, not rage clarity. She wasn't venting in a moment of frustration. She was calm, analytical, weighing options, announcing to her personal panel of advisors that being married to me was beneath her standards. I picked up the groceries and walked into the kitchen, making enough noise that she couldn't pretend I wasn't there. She looked up from her phone, and for a split second something flickered across her face, guilt, maybe, or the instant understanding that her private little club meeting had been overheard. Hey, she said, ending the call too quickly. How was work? I set the bags on the counter and met her eyes. Enlightening, I said. I learned some interesting things today about settling. The color drained from her face. She knew. And in that moment, watching her stand there with her phone still in her hand like a weapon she didn't want to put down, I realized the decision wasn't pending anymore. She had already told me exactly what she thought of me. Now it was my turn to show her what I thought about being someone's backup plan. I started unpacking groceries with deliberate calm, because calm is terrifying when someone expects anger. So, I said, sliding a carton of milk into the fridge without looking at her. Tell me about this settling conversation. Sounds like a popular topic. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. You heard that. Hard not to, I replied. especially when someone's discussing their marriage like a bad investment. I turned just enough to face her. 7 years. And I'm the safe option you're stuck with? That's not what I meant, she rushed out. But her voice was thin, like she didn't believe herself. You're taking it out of context. I folded my arms. Perfect. Give me the context where telling your friends you settled for your husband sounds okay. She tried to shift into reasonable discussion mode, like this was a misunderstanding we could talk our way out of. Everyone has doubts sometimes. People wonder what if. It doesn't mean anything. I repeated her words slowly. It doesn't mean anything. So when you said you were stuck in routine with me, that also meant nothing. Her cheeks flushed. She hadn't realized how much I'd heard. You're blowing this up, she said. I'm blowing it up? I let out a short laugh with no humor in it. From where I'm standing, my wife spent 20 minutes getting coached on how she deserves better than me, and you're calling that disproportionate? They're my friends, she said, like that was supposed to explain everything. Sometimes we talk about relationships. Friends support you, I said, voice steady. They don't encourage you to treat your marriage like a consolation prize. I watched her closely as she looked away, and that tiny movement told me more than any speech could. She didn't want to defend what she'd said, she wanted to escape it. It's complicated, she muttered. No, I said, and my tone surprised even me with how simple it sounded. It's not. Either you want to be here or you don't. Either you respect what we have or you're shopping for something better, while keeping me as your safety net. That's not fair, she protested. But there was no fire behind it, just annoyance that I wasn't cooperating. Relationships take work. Sometimes people need to vent. I shook my head. Venting is complaining that I leave dishes in the sink. What you did was question the entire foundation of our marriage in front of people who clearly think I'm not good enough for you. She tried a new angle. Maybe if we talked more about this stuff instead of assuming everything is fine. I stared at her. So now it's my fault. I was supposed to magically know you were unhappy even though you never said it to my face, you just announced it to everyone else. She didn't say it was my fault, but her tone did. I pointed at the air like I was underlining her words. So whose fault is it that you feel stuck in routine with the man you're settling for? She went quiet, calculating, weighing which answer would cost her the least. Finally she said, maybe we both could try harder. Try harder. I laughed again because the absurdity of it landed like a punch. You want me to try harder to convince you I'm worth staying married to? Like I'm competing with some fantasy your friends built for you. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? I leaned slightly forward. Because it sounds like you want me to audition for the role of husband, while you decide whether someone better is out there. Her frustration rose good. That meant I'd hit the truth. Why are you making this so hard? Can't we just talk like adults? Adults don't outsource their marriage to a committee of people who want them single, I said. Adults talk to their spouse first. Fine, she snapped. I should have talked to you first. But we're talking now, aren't we? I nodded once. Now you're doing damage control because you got caught. That's different. She stared at me, searching for the right combination of words that would reset everything and let her keep all her options open. Look, she said finally, maybe I said things I shouldn't have, but doesn't the fact that I'm here, that I chose to stay with you, count for something? I actually blinked, genuinely stunned. You want credit for staying with someone you think you settled for? She bristled. I want credit for being honest, for having normal doubts. Honest, I repeated. You were honest with them, not with me. And those weren't doubts. Those were conclusions. The room felt colder, like the air had sharpened. She couldn't take back what she said, and I couldn't unhear it. And worse than that, I could feel myself understanding something I didn't want to accept. This wasn't going to end with an apology and a promise to do better. She had revealed how she saw me safe, boring, convenient, and no amount of talking would magically rewrite that. But I wasn't done. If we were going to drag this into the light, I was going to expose every corner. Tell me about these friends, I said, turning back to the groceries. The ones with such strong opinions about our marriage. What about them? They seem very confident about what you deserve, I said. I'm curious what their qualifications are as relationship experts. She shifted uncomfortably. They just care about me. Because what I heard sounded like they were actively encouraging you to question whether you should still be married, I said, closing the pantry. That's a pretty strange way to care. Are they rooting for your happiness? Or are they rooting for you to join them? I paused, then added, let me guess. Most of them are single, divorced, or in relationships they complain about nonstop. Her silence answered me. Right? I nodded slowly. So women who can't keep a healthy relationship are mentoring you on how to handle yours. Perfect. She snapped. You don't know them. I know enough, I said. I know they convinced you that commitment is somehow a downgrade. I know they made you believe 7 years of building a stable life is the same as settling. They didn't convince me, she insisted. They helped me realize things. Then she hesitated, and I watched her decide honesty was her last defense. Like maybe I've been accepting less than I deserve. The words hung there. Less than you deserve. I repeated it quietly. So what do you think you deserve that you're not getting? She looked frustrated, like she wanted a dramatic answer ready-made. I don't know. Excitement. Passion. Feeling like my partner is grateful to have me. Not just comfortable. Comfortable, I echoed, voice even. So all those mornings I brought you coffee, all the nights I listened, all the times I supported you even when I was exhausted, that was me being comfortable? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I took a breath. Because it sounds like you've relabeled every steady, loyal thing I do as proof I'm not trying hard enough. She folded into defensiveness again. Other couples seem more alive, more connected. Other couples, I repeated. You mean the highlight reels you see online? Or the stories your friends tell you? The same friends who are alone or bitter. She frowned. Not everything is fake just because you don't see it. You're right, I said. Some couples are passionate. Some are exciting. And a lot of those burn out fast because they confuse drama with love. I straightened. But let me ask you something. When did stability become an insult? She crossed her arms. Stability isn't everything. No, I agreed. But it's the foundation everything else sits on. Without it, all that passion you're chasing turns into chaos. I held her gaze. I'm guessing your little advisory board didn't mention that part. Stop calling them that, she snapped. Why? That's what they are, I said. A committee that meets to discuss how inadequate the men in their lives are. What would you call it? She struggled, trying to defend them without admitting they were poison. They care about me, she repeated, weaker now. If they cared, I said, stepping closer. They would have told you to talk to your husband, not plan his replacement. They would have helped you appreciate what you have instead of constantly pointing at what you don't. Maybe they see things you don't, she said. Like what? I asked. That I'm not exciting enough? That I'm not some fantasy they invented for you? She shook her head. It's not money or looks. Then what is it? I pressed. Because I'd love to hear the fatal flaws your relationship gurus identified. She looked away again, and that told me the flaws were petty, shallow things that sound intelligent in an echo chamber but collapse under real scrutiny. This isn't about them, she whispered. It is, I said, because an hour ago you were fine. Then 20 minutes with the divorce cheer squad, and suddenly you're questioning everything. Maybe I was questioning it before, she admitted. Maybe I just needed someone to help me admit it. There it was, clean and sharp. This wasn't new. Her friends didn't plant it. They watered it. How long? I asked quietly. What? How long have you been thinking this? She didn't answer right away, which was an answer by itself. It doesn't matter, she said finally. It matters to me, I said, because it tells me whether you've been trying to fix this with me, or just waiting for permission to quit. She hugged herself, defensive again, and her face told the truth before her mouth did. Silence stretched between us, heavy with everything she hadn't said to me but had said to them. I took another step, voice lower. Here's the real problem. Doubts happen. Everyone has them. The problem is you didn't bring them to me. You turned our marriage into entertainment for people who have no interest in seeing it survive. That's not fair, she whispered. Fair, I repeated. Fair would have been coming to me the first time you felt this way. Fair would have been giving me a chance to address it before you decided I wasn't worth the effort. I was afraid of how you'd react, she said. I nearly laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was ridiculous. You were afraid to talk to your husband, but comfortable enough to discuss replacing him with a room full of people who don't even like him. They don't dislike you, she insisted. Encouraging someone to leave their spouse sure sounds like dislike, I said. Unless they're just that casual about wrecking marriages. She was getting angry now, which meant she was running out of excuses. Why can't you see that maybe I have legitimate concerns? Because you haven't shared any legitimate concerns with me, I said. All I've heard is I'm too stable, too predictable, too comfortable. Those aren't problems. Those are things people spend years trying to build. She stared at me and then said, almost defiant, maybe I don't want what most people want. Finally, we were at the truth. Okay, I said, calm as stone. Then what do you want? The question hung there like a dare. She opened her mouth, closed it, then forced it out. I want to feel like I'm living, not just existing. And being married to you feels like existing sometimes. That honesty hit harder than I expected. But I didn't flinch. And what does living look like? I asked. I don't know, she said, frustrated. Different, better, more exciting. More exciting than having someone come home to you every night? I asked. More exciting than having someone committed to building a future with you? She looked away. Maybe. I don't know. Wanting more isn't wrong, I said. What's wrong is deciding what you have isn't enough without even trying to improve it together. I paused, then added, that would require effort from you too. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means it's easier to complain to your friends about how boring your husband is than it is to actually do the work, I said. It's easier to fantasize about a perfect relationship than invest in the one you have. I invested 7 years, she snapped. You showed up for 7 years, I corrected. There's a difference. I moved to the window and stared out at the yard we'd planned to fix up this spring, and it suddenly looked like a future that didn't belong to both of us anymore. Investment is effort toward growth, I said. What you've done is sit back and expect me to provide the excitement while you judge the show. That's not true, she said, but her voice wasn't confident. Isn't it? I asked. When was the last time you planned something special for us? When was the last time you started a conversation about how we could be better without blaming me, without involving an audience? She went quiet, and for the first time it looked like she was actually thinking instead of defending. I thought about it, she said finally. You thought about it? I said, nodding. But you never acted. You never brought it to me. You let resentment grow until your friends gave you permission to speak it out loud. I didn't think you'd be receptive, she tried. Based on what? I asked. When have I ever been unreceptive to working on us? Another silence. Another question she couldn't answer without admitting the truth. The point is we're talking now, she insisted. Maybe we can figure out how to fix this. Fix this. I turned back to her fully. Do you really think this can be fixed with one conversation and a promise to try harder? Why not? Because you already told me what you really think, I said. You said being married to me is settling for less than you deserve. You can't unsay it. People say things they don't mean, she argued. You weren't angry when you said it, I replied. You were relaxed. You were comfortable. You were honest. The truth settled into the space like dust after a collapse. She realized she couldn't rewind time, and I realized I couldn't rebuild trust on a foundation that had cracked this deeply. So what now? She asked, quiet. I looked at her and felt something I didn't expect. Not hatred. Not revenge, just the firm understanding that I was done begging for respect. Now you get to see what it feels like when someone stops settling, I said. Her face paled. What does that mean? It means you spent so long wondering if you could do better than me, I said. That you forgot I can do better than someone who doesn't even want to be here. I never said I didn't want to be here, she whispered. You didn't have to, I said. Your actions said it for you. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. You have until tomorrow morning to decide if you truly want to work on this marriage, or if you want to go chase whatever you think you're missing. But I'm done being your safety net. That night I slept in my home office, giving her space to think and giving myself space to accept what I already knew. Through the thin walls, I heard her on the phone again, soft voice, urgent tone, getting emergency coaching from the same people who helped light the match. Around 10, she knocked. Can we talk? I looked up from paperwork I wasn't really reading. Depends, I said. Are you here to decide? Or are you here to negotiate terms that let you keep your options open? She stepped inside and closed the door like that would make it feel serious. I've been thinking, she began. Maybe we both said things we didn't mean. I leaned back. There it is, I said. The classic fake apology that tries to make us equally responsible for you shopping for a replacement husband. That's not what I was doing, she insisted. Then what were you doing? I asked. When you told them you were settling for me? She sat across from me, trying to create a calm, rational atmosphere. I was expressing frustration about feeling trapped in routine. Trapped, I repeated. Interesting word. Most people call it stability. But I guess once your friends rebrand stability as boredom, it starts feeling like a cage. She frowned. Why can't you accept that I might have valid concerns? Because your concerns aren't about our marriage, I said. They're about your fantasy of what marriage should look like. She tried a different play. What if we go to counseling? I almost smiled. So we can pay a professional to tell you what I'm telling you for free, that relationships require effort from both people? A neutral third party could help us communicate, she said. We communicate fine, I replied. The problem is you don't like what you hear when I communicate honestly. She leaned forward, trying to look sincere. I haven't decided anything. That's why I want to work on this. No, I said. You want time. You want to keep me close while you test whether the grass is greener. She shook her head, desperate. Why are you making it so black and white? Because it is, I said. Either you want to be married to me or you don't. Either you believe I'm worth the effort or you believe you settled. I stood. And based on what I heard, you already answered that. She started pleading then, grabbing at anything that might reset the situation. If I stop talking to them about our relationship, will that fix it? I looked at her for a long moment. The problem isn't talking, I said. The problem is thinking. At some point you decided what we have isn't enough, and you've been collecting validation for that belief ever since. Her eyes glistened. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe, I said, or maybe you weren't. But trying to convince you otherwise will just trap us in misery for another few years. Her voice cracked. So that's it? 7 years and you just give up? I'm not giving up, I said quietly. I'm refusing to compete for the respect of my own wife. I walked to the door and added, here's the difference between settling and choosing. When you settle, you spend your time wondering what else is out there. When you choose, you spend your time improving what you have. I can choose now. The next morning I woke up with the kind of clarity that doesn't come from sleep, it comes from finally accepting the truth you've been dodging. She was still asleep when I got up. I made coffee in silence and sat at the kitchen table, looking at the life we built. The problem wasn't the life. The problem was that one of us stopped valuing it. By 8, my decision was made. By 9, I was acting on it. I pulled her suitcases from the closet and started packing her clothes neatly. Not angrily, not dramatically, just efficiently. Years together had taught me exactly what was hers. I folded things the way she liked, because even then I didn't feel the need to be petty. When she came downstairs around 10, she stopped dead at the sight of the bags lined up by the front door. What are you doing? She asked, voice shaky. Making it easier for you to figure out what you want, I said, without looking up from a note I was writing. You can't be serious. I nodded once. I'm completely serious. You said you felt like you were settling. So now you don't have to settle anymore. She stared at the luggage and then at me like her brain couldn't translate what her eyes were seeing. "This is insane," she snapped. "You can't throw me out over a conversation." I set the pen down. "I'm not throwing you out over a conversation," I said. "I'm letting you go because that conversation showed me something I can't unsee." I placed the note on top of the nearest suitcase. "You don't want to be here. You want better. So go find it." Her eyes widened. "I never said I wanted to leave." "You didn't have to," I replied. "Your friends said it for you and you agreed." I looked at her fully then, and she could see it. No anger, no shouting, no drama, just a decision. "The only reason you're panicking now is because I stopped playing the part you assigned me," I said. "This isn't a game," she whispered. "This is my house."
No, y correcta gently.
"This was our home, but you turned it into a place you felt trapped. And I'm not going to be your jailer." She stepped closer, desperation leaking into her voice. "We can fix this." I said, "I'm willing to try." "You're willing to try now that there are consequences," I said. "But in 6 months, when life settles back into normal, you'll be back on the phone with your advisors, complaining about how boring everything is." "You don't know that." "I do," I said, "because people who truly want to stay don't spend their time planning exits." She reached for me and I stepped back. "This is a mistake," she said, shaking. "A huge mistake." I lifted my coffee mug and took a slow sip. "The mistake was thinking I could make you appreciate something you'd already decided wasn't enough," I said. "I'm done making that mistake." Her voice rose. "So you're really ending this without fighting for us?" I looked at her for a long moment, not seeing the woman I married so much as the stranger she'd become, someone who measured love by what it lacked instead of what it built. "I did fight," I said quietly. "For years. I showed up. I listened. I supported you. I celebrated you. I tried to build something solid." I set the mug down. "But I can't fight for someone who already checked out." "I didn't check out," she insisted. "When was the last time you looked at me and felt grateful instead of disappointed?" I asked. "When was the last time you talked about our future like you wanted it, without wondering if you'd rather have a different one with someone else?" She couldn't answer, and that was answer enough. I walked to the door and opened it, then nodded toward the bags. "Here's something you can tell your friends," I said, a calm edge in my voice. "You're not settling anymore." She stared at the suitcases like they were a threat. "What is this supposed to mean?" "It means you're free," I said. "Free to go chase whatever you think you deserve. No more stable, predictable husband holding you back from your best life." "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "I'm being honest," I said. Maybe for the first time in a long time. I leaned against the doorway. "Do you know what the real tragedy is? You had something real, something most people spend a lifetime looking for, and you tossed it aside because your friends convinced you it wasn't exciting enough." "I didn't toss anything," she whispered. "You did," I said. "The moment you decided I wasn't worth your loyalty. This is just me recognizing reality." She looked between me and the bags, mind racing, searching for the magical phrase that would undo consequences. "If I was wrong, if I made a mistake," her voice cracked. I nodded once. "Then you'll learn from it somewhere else," I said. "With someone else's time, energy, and trust." "Please," she begged, barely audible. I stepped closer, handed her the note. "Read that when you get wherever you're going," I said. "And give my regards to your little advisory board. Tell them their guidance worked perfectly." Her hands trembled as she took it. "What does it say?" "It says what I should have said yesterday," I replied, "when I heard you discussing our marriage like it was a burden." I stepped back, and my voice turned final. "Figure it out. Your things are outside. It's time to go." The words hung in the air like a gavel, clean, absolute, no space for bargaining. She stared at me, waiting for me to crack, to soften, to give her another chance to reframe it as a misunderstanding. But I'd already given her years of chances, and she used them to wonder if she could do better. 20 minutes later, she was gone. The house fell silent in a way it hadn't been for months, not the tense silence of resentment, but the quiet peace of a space that finally felt like mine again. I poured another coffee and sat at the kitchen table, imagining her across town calling her friends, explaining how unreasonable I was, how I overreacted, how she didn't mean it. But I knew the truth. She meant every word. And now she could live with the consequences, while I could finally find someone who doesn't treat being with me like settling for less. And the funniest part? Her friends would need a new marriage to advise on because mine was officially finished. Alright, if you made it to the end, drop a comment with where you're listening from and tell me honestly. Would you have done the same thing in my shoes? And if you want more stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I've got another video waiting for you, and I'll see you in the next story.